The email hit my inbox at exactly 8:02 a.m. A clean, clinical message from HR. Effective immediately, your salary will be adjusted to reflect recent organizational cost optimizations. 20%. 20% gone, right after I pulled off the $7 million deal that saved this sinking ship. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, one hand gripping the old silver ring on my finger like a lifeline. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted the most? Stay with me until the end of this story. You might just find a part of yourself in it. Marcus had promised. 3 months ago, under the flickering lights of that late-night strategy session, he had leaned across the conference table and said, "Claire, just get this deal done. I'll make sure you're rewarded. Big time." I had believed him. I had wanted to believe him. The ring on my finger, a simple, worn silver band my mother gave me when I first started working, had always reminded me to stay loyal, to stay steady. So I did. Through 14-hour days, through working weekends, through migraines and missed anniversaries. When the client finally signed, when the ink dried and the champagne bottles popped in the executive lounge, I thought my loyalty meant something. It didn't. Not to Marcus. I wasn't naive enough to think it was a mistake. The timing was too perfect, the wording too sterile. I had become an easy target, a cost-saving bullet point on his performance review. A living sacrifice he could parade to the board to show how tough and fiscally responsible he was. I sat there at my desk, feeling the sting of betrayal seep into my bones. Around me, the office buzzed on, oblivious, or maybe willfully so. People passed by, offering tight, polite smiles. Some avoided eye contact altogether. They knew. Of course they knew. Marcus wasn't subtle about his ambitions. Everyone knew he was gunning for the regional director spot, the one opening up next quarter when Mr. Carlisle retired. And everyone knew that in this company, being cost-efficient was the golden ticket to a promotion. He had found the perfect pawn. Me. I pressed my thumb against the cool metal of the ring, grounding myself. This wasn't just a salary cut. It was a warning shot, a signal. Stay quiet. Be grateful. Or be expendable. I should have been angry. I should have stormed into his glass-walled office and demanded answers. But instead, I inhaled slowly, letting the air fill every corner of my lungs. There's power in silence, in patience, in refusing to react exactly the way they expect you to. Marcus thought he had clipped my wings. He thought cutting my paycheck would cage me, silence me, break me. He was wrong, because even as I sat there, pretending to scroll through emails, pretending not to notice the satisfied smirk Marcus shot me from across the floor, I was already planning. He didn't know it yet. But the next name on that regional director plaque? It wouldn't be his. It would be mine, and he would watch every second of it happen. I didn't storm into Marcus's office that morning. I didn't slam my resignation letter onto his desk or make a scene in front of the whole floor. No, I gave him a chance, the courtesy of a conversation he didn't deserve. Late that afternoon, I knocked softly on the frosted glass door. Marcus didn't even bother looking up from his laptop when he said, "Come in." I stepped inside, ring cold against my knuckle, voice steady. I wanted to check in about the salary adjustment. Finally, he looked at me, smiled. That same oily, patronizing smile he wore whenever he thought he was 2 moves ahead. "Claire," he said smoothly, gesturing for me to sit. "This isn't permanent. You know how it is. Restructuring, pressure from the top, HR pushing for numbers. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. A 20% pay cut, after carrying this company on my back for months. And it was nothing personal. I sat down anyway, folding my hands neatly on my lap. I understand the pressures. I just want to make sure. I'm still considered part of the long-term vision. Marcus leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk in a mock show of deep thought. "You're a valuable asset, Claire," he said. "I fought to keep you here. Just hang tight. Once the dust settles, and I'm in a position to really make changes." He trailed off, letting the implication hang thick between us. When he was promoted, Then he might throw me a bone. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, professional, exactly what he expected. Inside, something sharp twisted in my gut. I thanked him for his transparency and stood to leave. At the door, I paused. "Marcus," I said, my hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, I still believe loyalty should count for something." He smiled again, tight, smug. "Of course it does, Claire. That's why you're still here." I closed the door behind me, hearing the soft click of the latch like the final nail sealing a coffin. Maybe his, maybe mine. Time would tell. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work harder than ever. I came in early, stayed late, triple-checked every deliverable. Not because I believed Marcus would keep his word, but because I needed the records, the undeniable proof that I was still the same high-performing Claire, the same backbone of this department. Word around the office was that Marcus's promotion was practically a done deal. He was already taking meetings with the executive team, schmoozing higher-ups, talking about long-term strategic visions, like he was already sitting in the director's chair. And to my face, he was all false sympathy and vague promises. "We just need to ride this out, Claire. Trust me." So I trusted. But not him. I trusted the process I was setting in motion quietly, piece by piece. The silver ring stayed on my finger every day, a reminder of the woman I was raised to be, strong, patient, unshakable. Even when I wanted to scream, even when it burned to watch colleagues who once respected me now treat me like a ghost. I would wait, I would endure. And when the moment came, I wouldn't just reclaim what was mine. I would make sure Marcus watched every second of it crumble around him. He thought I was holding still out of loyalty. He didn't realize I was just pulling the arrow back further. It started with the small things, the invitations to project meetings that somehow never made it to my calendar, the water cooler conversations that fell silent the second I approached, the subtle glances, the quiet whispering just beyond my hearing. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People were busy, people were stressed. It wasn't about me. But then I caught them, 3 of my so-called teammates, in the break room, laughing over a spreadsheet that looked suspiciously like the quarterly report I had built. When they saw me, they froze. One of them, a woman I had mentored for 2 years, quickly slammed her laptop shut, forcing a brittle smile onto her face. "Claire, hey, we were just, going over Marcus's new strategy proposal." Marcus's new strategy, built on my numbers, my late nights, my weekends sacrificed. I left without a word. Better to let them have their victory, for now. The isolation worsened. Meetings where I was once a central voice now passed me by like I didn't exist. Emails I sent out requesting support for key projects were met with one-word responses, if they were answered at all. It was as if Marcus had sent out an unspoken order. "Claire is done, ignore her." And the vultures listened, because in a place like this, loyalty was currency, and mine had apparently depreciated. I watched it all with a calm detachment, like studying a storm rolling in over the horizon. It hurt. Of course it hurt. These were people I had celebrated birthdays with, mourned losses with, trusted. Now, they treated me like a ghost. It wasn't long before the final insult landed. Marcus held a department-wide meeting to announce a new era of collaboration and efficiency. In that meeting, he praised several team members by name, every one of them someone who had helped sideline me, and presented a vision plan, almost word for word, lifted from a strategy document I had privately emailed him 6 months ago. He didn't mention my name once. Not for the $7 million contract, not for the quarterly growth I had driven, not for anything. I sat there, stiff-backed, staring straight ahead as polite applause filled the room. My ring felt heavy on my hand, a cold, solid weight reminding me who I was and who I refused to become. And yet, for a flicker of a moment, doubt gnawed at me. Had I been stupid to believe in loyalty? Had I wasted years of my life building something that could be erased overnight? Have you ever felt the crushing loneliness of realizing you were only valued for what you could produce, not for who you are? I'd love to hear your story if you're willing to share. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone changes everything. The days dragged on like a slow funeral march. I came to work each morning with a tight smile, an iron spine, and a growing arsenal of evidence. Every stolen idea, every manipulated report, every hushed meeting behind closed doors. I wasn't just documenting Marcus's betrayal now, I was building my own insurance policy. A record that would not only clear my name, but scorch his to ash. Meanwhile, Marcus grew bolder. He started holding one-on-one meetings with executives without even pretending to include me. He let rumors spread that he was already choosing his new leadership team, a team I, of course, was not a part of. I heard whispers that Marcus had pitched himself to the CEO as the architect of the company's turnaround, conveniently omitting the woman who had done the heavy lifting. Let him, I thought. Let him build his house of lies as high as he could. The higher he climbed, the harder he would fall. One morning, as I passed his office, I caught a glimpse of him through the glass, laughing, toasting with a glass of scotch at his desk at 10 a.m. with one of his cronies. And still, I said nothing. I walked past him, past the closed circles of whispering colleagues, past the heavy, smothering sense of betrayal, and returned to my desk. I pulled up the folder labeled Contingency Plan on my desktop, checked every file again, cross-referenced every email, every document, updated the timeline. Everything was in place. Everything was ready. Marcus thought he was celebrating the end of me. He didn't realize he was dancing on the edge of his own downfall, and when the final blow came, he wouldn't even see it coming. It happened late one Thursday night, long after the office had emptied out and the cleaning crews had made their rounds. I was sitting at my desk, the overhead lights dimmed to a muted hum, cross-referencing expense reports against project logs. Half from habit, half because some instinct inside me knew that the final piece of the puzzle was close. That's when the email landed, a misrouted internal thread, a blessing from whatever small gods watch over the patient and the betrayed. Subject: FY24 Strategic Realignments, Leadership Credit Attribution. I clicked it open, expecting another hollow corporate memo. What I found instead turned my blood cold. It was a draft report Marcus had submitted to the executive committee, outlining all the key contributions that had enabled the company's financial turnaround. My name appeared exactly once, next to the words, provided basic administrative support. Administrative support for negotiating a $7 million contract, for spearheading 2 consecutive quarters of record growth. Meanwhile, Marcus had listed himself as the lead strategist, client negotiator, and project executioner. He hadn't just stolen my credit. He had rewritten history, erased me from it, and he was about to present this report to the CEO and board at the quarterly review next week. For a long moment, I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Every cell in my body screamed to act, to fire off angry emails, to march into offices and demand apologies, to finally scream. But then, I remembered the ring. The silver band glinted under the office lights, a small, silent reminder. Stay steady, stay sharp, strike only when the blade is ready. I carefully forwarded the email to my private account, encrypted it, and backed it up to 3 different secure locations. Then I started digging. Over the next few hours, I unearthed a damning trove of evidence, emails where Marcus took personal credit for strategies I had documented months earlier. Financial adjustments he had made without proper approvals, cutting project cost in ways that risked breaching client contracts. Instances where he had reallocated employee bonuses, mine included, without disclosure to HR. By the time dawn painted faint gold lines across the skyline, I had a full arsenal. This wasn't just a petty office power grab anymore. This was potential fraud. And in our industry, one proven case of financial misconduct could end a career overnight and trigger mandatory audits, that would dig even deeper. I closed my laptop slowly, my body buzzing with a strange electric calm. Marcus had built his castle on stolen bricks, and now it was time to hand the demolition crew the blueprint. I didn't rush. I didn't gloat. I didn't even allow myself the satisfaction yet. Instead, I composed a short, precise email requesting a private meeting with the CEO. No emotional pleas, no dramatic subject lines, just a simple request. Update on recent project credit clarifications. Request for 15-minute discussion. I hit send. Then I slid the ring off my finger for the first time in years, laid it carefully in the center of my desk, and whispered into the stillness, for loyalty, for dignity, for every silent hour spent believing justice would find its way. Because now, I wasn't waiting for justice anymore. I was bringing it with me. The CEO's assistant replied within 2 hours. Mr. Halston is available tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. sharp. 15 minutes. 15 minutes to rewrite the narrative. 15 minutes to pull Marcus's empire down with precision and poise. I spent that night refining my files. No accusations, no emotional outbursts, just a clean, brutal portfolio of facts. Dates, documents, screenshots, audit trail links. When I finally slept, it was the dreamless, deep sleep of someone who had already made peace with whatever came next. The next morning, I walked into the executive floor with my back straight, my steps measured. I wore a crisp navy suit, minimal makeup, and the old silver ring tucked into my pocket. Close, but not on my hand. The receptionist offered a polite nod, clearly briefed not to ask questions. She led me to a small private conference room. At precisely 8:30, the door opened. Mr. Halston entered, early 40s, sharp-eyed, exuding the casual authority of a man who was used to weighing people's worth with a single glance. Claire, he said, extending his hand, I hear you have something important for me. I shook his hand firmly. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't waste time. I placed a slim binder on the table between us, sliding it forward. These documents relate to the leadership credit attribution for the last fiscal year, I said evenly. I believe there are material misrepresentations in the report submitted by Marcus Fallon. No venom in my voice, no drama, just the facts. Halston arched one brow, but said nothing as he opened the binder. Silence stretched between us, heavy and electric, as he flipped through page after page. The strategic roadmap I had authored months before Marcus unveiled his plan, client communications bearing my signature, negotiations Marcus had claimed credit for, expense reports flagged with irregularities tied directly to Marcus's accounts, HR bonus allocations that didn't match company policy. By the time he reached the last page, his jaw was tight. He tapped a knuckle thoughtfully against the table. How long have you known about this? He asked. I confirmed the scope last night, I said. And you chose to come to me directly rather than go public? I respect the company, I said simply. And I believe in handling things properly. Halston studied me for a long moment, the weight of a dozen silent calculations passing between us. You've shown remarkable restraint, he said finally. And loyalty. 2 words that tasted bittersweet on my tongue after everything I'd endured. I didn't come here for revenge, I said, and meant it. I came because the truth matters, and because I refuse to be erased. A slow smile curled at the corner of his mouth, not warm exactly, but approving. The board will need to be briefed, he said. But you'll be protected. This will not go unnoticed. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Be in the main conference room tomorrow morning at 9. I'll handle the rest. I rose, gathering my binder, heart hammering like a war drum inside my chest. Tomorrow. It would all come crashing down tomorrow. That night, the building buzzed with rumors. Something big was happening. Executives were being pulled into late meetings. Department heads whispered in hallways, their eyes darting nervously. Marcus, of course, looked smugger than ever. He thought the commotion was about him, about his promotion. I caught him standing outside the glass wall of his office, talking animatedly with two other managers, practicing his humble bragging smile, his fake modest nods. I didn't engage, didn't warn, didn't gloat. I simply walked past, silent and invisible, the storm gathering just out of sight. If Marcus noticed the shift, the stiffness in people's greetings, the cautious way they answered his questions, he didn't show it. He was too busy measuring the size of his imaginary throne. And that suited me just fine. I spent my last evening before Judgment Day polishing every last detail. I backed up my files again. I reviewed my notes. I packed a small leather folder, the same one I carried into my very first big client pitch years ago. A reminder. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. In the quiet of my apartment, I pulled the silver ring from my pocket and slid it back onto my finger. It caught the light, steady and true. No rage, no tears, only clarity. Tomorrow, Marcus would find out what happens when you mistake loyalty for weakness. And I would be standing exactly where I was meant to be, not behind him, not beside him, but above him. The conference room was packed. Every department head, every senior executive, every ambitious middle manager who dreamed of climbing the ladder. They were all there, suits crisp, smiles thin. Marcus stood near the head of the long mahogany table, practically vibrating with excitement. He wore a new tailored suit, a Rolex glinting under the fluorescent lights, and that insufferable smirk he thought passed for charm. He didn't notice the way Mr. Halston's jaw was set tighter than usual. He didn't notice the way the board members avoided looking directly at him. He was too busy rehearsing his victory speech in his head. I sat near the end of the table, calm, composed, my leather folder resting lightly on my lap. The silver ring on my finger caught the overhead lights, a small, steady flare. Halston opened the meeting briskly. "Before we proceed with today's agenda," he said, voice clipped, "there's an urgent matter we need to address regarding leadership integrity and fiscal responsibility." The room shifted, a subtle tightening of shoulders and nervous glances. Marcus straightened his tie, clearing his throat, clearly assuming this was the prelude to his big moment. It wasn't. Halston continued, pulling out a folder, the same one I had given him, and laying it flat on the table. "In recent weeks," he said, "a number of serious discrepancies have come to our attention regarding project credit attributions and expense reporting." He paused, letting the words sink in, letting Marcus sweat. "After a thorough review," Halston said, his gaze locking onto Marcus like a missile, "it is clear that Marcus Fallon has misrepresented his contributions to several key initiatives and has engaged in unauthorized financial reallocations." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Marcus's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but Halston raised a hand, silencing him. "This organization cannot and will not tolerate misconduct at any level," Halston said, his voice sharp. "Effective immediately, Marcus Fallon is suspended pending further investigation." Security, as if on cue, stepped into the room. The murmurs became a buzz, half shock, half awe. Marcus sputtered, turned red, then pale, looking around for an ally, for anyone to speak up. No one did, not one. They had moved on already, just like they had moved on from me. Marcus was escorted out, his designer shoes squeaking against the polished floors. The door closed behind him with a soft, definitive click. Halston turned back to the room. "And now," he said, smoothing his jacket, "it's time to talk about the future." He looked at me. "Claire Benson, please join me at the head of the table." For a second, no one moved, as if the words hadn't registered. Then, slowly, heads turned. Whispers broke out. I rose, steady and sure, folder in hand, and walked the long stretch to the front. Halston smiled, genuine this time. "Claire has been the driving force behind our recent successes," he said. "Her leadership, her strategic mind, and her integrity represent the future of this company." "Effective immediately," Claire Benson will assume the role of regional director. Applause thundered across the room, some genuine, some desperate, but none more important than the quiet applause I felt inside my own chest. As I stood there, accepting the position that had once been dangled just out of reach, I slipped my hand into my pocket and brushed my fingers against the silver ring. A reminder: loyalty to your values will never be a weakness. It's your crown. When the meeting ended, people swarmed around me. Handshakes, congratulations, polite words laced with thinly veiled regret. I accepted them with a measured smile, neither cold nor warm. Not out of pettiness, out of clarity. I had learned something vital through this war. Not everyone who claps for you is happy for you. Not everyone who smiles at you stands beside you. As the crowd thinned, I made my way back to my office, the same one I had worked in through all the late nights and lonely lunches. The sunlight spilled across my desk, catching the small silver ring resting in the center. I picked it up, turning it slowly between my fingers. All those years, I had thought loyalty meant obedience, that patience meant silence, that if I just worked hard enough, trusted hard enough, stayed good enough, justice would come on its own. But justice doesn't walk through the door. You have to go out and claim it yourself. You have to stand, even when standing feels like the loneliest thing in the world. You have to endure long enough to outlast the storm, and smart enough to know when to act. Marcus taught me that without even realizing it. He thought he was burning me down. All he did was forge steel. I slid the ring back onto my finger, feeling its weight settle. A familiar steadying pressure. Not a chain anymore. A crown. I looked out the window, the city stretching wide and golden beyond the glass. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the chapter I would write by my own rules. Quietly, fiercely, on my terms. Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the woman who says nothing, who smiles when they expect her to cry, who walks taller after every shove, who wins without ever raising her voice. Have you ever fought a silent battle and won without anyone seeing the storm you survived? If you have, your story deserves to be told. Share it with me if you feel ready. Sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that define us the most.